Welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. And my guests, you've been listening to Joyce Bawa Muktari, Professor Kweku Asari, Professor Kofi Abochi, Oliver Bakavomowo, and Hajia Rabi Salifu. We will be joined shortly by Alfred Tuayeboa, former Deputy Attorney General, as we begin to talk about purely legal, constitutional matters. And let me share just a couple of your messages with you. And this one, Prince Henry says, fellow Ghanaians, let us support and have confidence in John Mahama to deliver and take us to the promised land. Ghana will be great again if we play our individual patriotic roles as citizens. I am a Ghanaian, I am Ghana, you are Ghana, and together we build the Ghana we want. Then Peter Doe Jr. says, what's more scared, intimidated, and dangerous to human life than live in Ghana under Akufo-Addo for 8 years? We heard from some security experts that that's how Ibrahim Traoré will appear at ceremony, considering many security threats he faces. That's how he will appear. Okay, so it should be excused. That's what you mean. Excellence Reign says, it's good John Mahama has taken this bold step to investigate the killings of innocent Ghanaians who were killed in the 2020 and 2024 elections. The people behind this must be held accountable for their action. This is also a test for the IGP. There was a petition to the Shraj by Okudiatoa Blakwa and some others. I think Emmanuel Kofi Bua was also part of it. And the Shraj wrote to the IGP for his comments because they were in charge of the Election Security Task Force for 2020 as well. The IGP wrote and told Shraj that Shraj could not investigate the matter because the matters were being prosecuted already. And right after the elections in 2021, the police issued a report, but that report was kept internal. It was private. They had actually said that 6 people were killed. And I have said, reading that report myself, I saw a lot of lame excuses that were offered there. And it doesn't appear they didn't do anything after that. And they left things to be the way they are. Until today, they are being asked to go into the matters and investigate them. Let's see how it goes. You remember that a court also had the opportunity to slam the Attorney General when it's suggested that they were only firing warning shots. And the court said that the use of lethal fire was not justified and that there was no basis for its use, leading to the killing of the 8 people. Right. Okay, let's see how it ends. Abdullahi Pagla Isa says that 60 ministers, including deputies, that's the promise. Your stammering this morning means that Mahama can't keep to this promise. The coming events cast their shadows. We are waiting. Then Sekou Nana Nkrumah says we need to privatize Electricity Company of Ghana. Okay, we have heard John Jinapo also suggesting that already. Then Baba Chairman in Tamale says John Jinapo and NDC must prepare to hit the ground running and not give us excuses. They made sweet promises to Ghanaians. They should just deliver them. Okay, thank you for those messages. We will return to a few more that you have been sharing on the subject matter that we have looked at. So let's, Bright says that Mahama said in his speech that G7 nations GDP will be reduced to 29% in 2029, whilst the BRICS nations GDP have hit 39% in the world economy. Means Mahama will follow BRICS nations instead of G7? That's a question. Okay. Thanks for your comments. Let's now go to the matter of the botched presidential pardon. This is normally supposed to be a very harmless process, and it is done during the holidays by presidents. You've heard about Trump issuing the pardons. Even Biden also had just issued pardons, including for his own son. So what was Akufo-Addo, what did he intend to do? And he issued that letter from his office under the hand of Ko Esuman, the legal counsel to the president. And the list included William Atuesian, Philip Akpene Asibit, you remember him, on the matters in the previous administration that led to imprisonment, including Abuga Pele, who was also pardoned. Prof, following this matter, what will be your commentary?
Well, I think that the issue about presidential pardon generally is one that I find controversial. I have never really accepted that aspect of our constitution. I think that presidents should have no business pardoning people. When people are jailed or convicted in accordance with the judicial process, that should terminate it. And I do not think that presidents sitting in a political position should ordinarily be given that power. Historically, the reason kings and queens of England pardoned people were because the courts were the kings and queens' courts. And so they have essentially delegated their judicial authority to the courts. And so they could have the final say. And on ceremonial occasions, out of goodwill, they pardon people. Our constitution has sort of adopted that, in my opinion, without much historical context, unfortunately. We've been doing this over the years, and that's part of the problem that we have. So you have a president sitting ex cathedra who may not have much knowledge about the factual circumstances and even the whole trial process, deciding that out of goodwill I'm pardoning one person or the other. That is what leads to controversy if the president does not steep himself in adequate consultation and support. And that is why the Constitution says that the president shall consult. But we have seen this time and again when presidents have pardoned people who ordinarily ought not to be pardoned, so to speak. And then the contest and the controversy and the criticisms will come. I think we have a few examples in history. The current one, I would say that perhaps, but for one or two names that appears in there, or that appear in there, maybe this would have passed without people even knowing about it. Yeah. But those one or two names then implicate broader problems with the whole pardoning process. I'll tell you this. In the prisons, we have people who are on remand and who have been on remand for more than 5 years. In the past, I've witnessed more than 10 years in respect of cases in which, had they even gone through the trial and been convicted, the penalty for the offense will not be up to the period they have already spent on remand. We have people in prison who clearly have been convicted improperly, and evidence has shown, subsequent evidence has shown, that they ought not be in prison. They are still in prison. We have people in prison who, as a result of ill health or other circumstances, as a result of other circumstances, as it were, they deserve consideration for pardon. We have people in prison who, by reason of a number of other extenuating factors, deserve pardon who ordinarily are not considered. The question is, what is the empirical basis? What is the research basis? Who has done some work to itemize those out of the political consideration, out of other, connected persons consideration, people who are connected to power, making these references? How do we insulate the pardon process from preferences that are unjustifiable, so to speak? And
on this list, there are few that reasons were not assigned for why they were in consideration for pardon. Akwesi Alhassan, number one, says he was convicted of murder and sentenced to death on the 19th of March, 1993. He has been in prison since then. That's 31 years. He's now serving life imprisonment per presidential order. That's the end of it. It doesn't say why he's being considered for pardon, whether he's had a transformative life or something. Beatrice Ofori, she was convicted of human trafficking on the 6th of June 2023, like recently, for 8 years with hard labor. She is currently 64 years, so that may be the consideration. Old and is seriously hypertensive. So the reason is given. This has affected both legs, leading to her inability to move freely. She spends most of her time in the prison infirmary. Then William Atuesian comes in. He was convicted for his role in the collapse of Capital Bank and sentenced to pay 90 million Ghana cedis. He defaulted after paying part of the money. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison in December 2023. He is suffering from severe life-threatening medical conditions and has undergone multiple surgeries as a result. Franco Bain, we are not told why he is being, sought to be pardoned after he was sentenced for manslaughter. There's Stephen Nyako. We are not told why he is also being pardoned. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison in 2010. He's done 22 years. Philip Asibit, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison in 2018 for willfully causing financial loss to the state related to his role at the National Youth Employment Program. He has served 6 years in prison. He has pleaded to be released on the grounds of ill health. So that's how it goes.
Right. But I will argue that you have 10 times more the number of people on this list who reflect the same indices. The question is, why are they still in there? So it's important to broaden this. It's important to objectify it and take it out of the remit of the politicized environment in which usually it's been administered. And I will argue that the difficulty with this is that even though you've had explanation for someone, for example, like Atuesian, it's a difficult conversation for some people. And the reason is because the banking crisis, so to speak, is still ongoing.
That's right.
In fact, President Mohammed's speech, reflected that's one area there will probably have to be some forensic investigation moving forward. Either his speech, or I think I saw it somewhere, among some of the things that he would do in the first couple of days or months or weeks in office.
120 days.
Right, 120 days in office. So that tells you that we have a situation that is still ongoing, and then we have culprits who are in the process of being pardoned. For some people, that was difficult to swallow. So I think that some of these things, you look at broader issues. I can understand the humanitarian consideration issues, such as the fact that, look, he's undergone medical conditions and medical treatments, and he's suffering from debilitating medical condition. These are humanitarian considerations, and they actually justify pardon. But the point I'm making is it's important to look at this broadly, holistically, more non-politically, and out of the whole political environment and the pressure that attends to this, because it undermines the effect of it. Even though I will go back to how I started, I generally am against pardons because they make no sense to the judicial process. If people are guilty, they serve the penalty. If they are not guilty and they are innocent, they shouldn't be there in the first place. I think it's important that we rather get the judicial process right instead of the political pardon that usually comes post-conviction. Okay,
so this letter that communicated this from the Office of the President, dated the 31st of December 2024, was to the chairperson of the Council of State and was copied to the Vice President and also copied to the Chief of Staff. And then the Communications Director of the Office of the President issued a statement on the 6th of January 2025, saying that the attention of the Office of the President has been drawn to reports circulating in sections of the media suggesting that the President of the Republic, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, has granted a presidential pardon to certain individuals. And he says, we wish to categorically state that these assertions are inaccurate and no pardon has been granted by President Akufo-Addo. The public is kindly urged to disregard any contrary information and rely on official communications from the Office of the President. It did not deny the letter from the presidency and the content of it signed by the legal counsel to the president. Of course, the terms of that letter was that it was going to the Council of State for consultations for these people to be released. Would you say that this has been botched, it's lost? or there's an opportunity for it.
Opportunity for who?
For the list to be treated in the manner that it was intended. The consultations from the Council of State, if they approved, maybe they don't approve all the people there.
The ultimate directive will have to go to the Director of Prisons, who's the custodian of these persons. Until then, they may be treated as notifications of kinds and notifications of intent. So I think the presidency or the ex-presidency was playing on words, and playing on words in the sense that we really haven't granted pardon. We're asking the Council of State to say, okay, and then perhaps we'll go forward with that. Once they gauged the temperature and they realized the country's mood apparently wasn't in support, they quickly then played on words and said, look, truly we haven't granted pardons. We have taken note of the allegations that we have, but disregarded because we haven't. But the truth of the matter is that it appears that the process was about to finally unfold. And look at the date. This is on the 6th.
Yeah.
So there were actually very few hours left.
That's right.
And so I think as soon as the Council of State had okayed that, if they had, I'm sure the Director of Prisons would have been notified officially about the fact that these persons have been granted pardons. He should take appropriate note and grant the releases from the custody in which they have been kept.
Afrechoi Ejura will explain to us the status before midnight of the 6th of January 2026. So Afrechoi Ejura is joining us. Let's go to Professor Kukwasari. Prof, what's your assessment and commentary about their development?
Well, I really see this as, once again, government not telling us the truth. And Oliver mentioned the importance of truth-telling, and I highlighted why I liked Mohammed's emphasis on truth-telling. Without truth-telling, you create a trust deficit. Accountability is difficult to achieve, and democracy doesn't function very well. Before I go into the truth aspects, let me say that I have no problem with the pardon power, unlike Professor Abochi, because sometimes you need that. There can be miscarriage of justice. We shouldn't think that the judicial system is some perfect system. Sometimes there's miscarriage of justice, and a president has to come in to reverse that miscarriage. And then he mentioned compassion reasons. That's true. Rehabilitation. Sometimes even for national reconciliation. A good case in point is the pardon granted to Kwame Pianim, who was put in prison because allegedly he attempted to overthrow the PNDC regime, something that many of us thought was necessary. And so when we transitioned into democracy, it was important that somebody like Kwame Pianim would be pardoned. I have no problem with pardon power. Of course, if you are going to do pardoning, and we are going to make sure that the people come along with it, then we must have some formal process. In many countries, they have a pardon committee, and people in prison can apply to the pardon committee. They follow processes, they interview them, and so on, and then they give recommendations to the president. In this particular case, the president truthfully on 6th January notified us that, well, he hasn't pardoned anyone, and so we should ignore reports that he has done so, which is true. But it doesn't really address the letter of December 31. The letter of December 31 says there's consultation going on between him and the Council of State. That was what he needed to address. Is there consultation going on? That was the issue. And then let me talk about this story of leakage, or this culture of leakage, because I myself have been falsely accused of leaking something. But here is another instance where there is a leakage from the presidency about communication between the president and the Council of State. Who leaked that letter? Was it a tribaloon, the presidency itself trying to gauge the temperature of the country? Was it leaked by someone from the Council of State? Was it leaked by some internal staff at the Jubilee House? I mean, who leaked this thing?
It will be difficult to tell.
Of course, that's the point. And if it will be difficult to tell, you just don't accuse somebody in a formal document that we think there's a leakage, and in this Jubilee House where leakage is rampant, then we are accusing you of the leakage. And here's an example of a leakage, and we don't know who. I agree with you that we don't know who. That's exactly my point. Now, if this thing had been handled well, I mean, again, I wouldn't have seen any problem with pardoning. The problem here is that we are not being told the truth, and the process between the presidency and the Council of State somehow got out of kilter. Maybe it should have been done earlier. It wasn't.
You would not,
the last minute.
Prof, you would not have had any problem, including for people like Emmanuel Edu Mensah, who was convicted for narcotic offenses just in April of 2024. And you're asking, how does he get a pardon? There are many other convicts, people convicted of lesser offenses who are still in prison. Why is a narcotic offender being removed?
Well, I would have had a problem with that. And that's why I earlier said I would prefer there's a pardon committee that evaluates these issues. Nevertheless, merely because I would have had problems with it doesn't take away from the president's power to grant pardon. I mean, my recourse would have been through some, accountability. Of course, in this case, there will be none because he's going out of power anyway. But that is the nature of the pardon power. It always excites all kinds of emotions, not just in Ghana, but everywhere. In the US, people are crying about, well, why is Joe Biden giving his son pardon? Well, okay, because a president has the pardon power, and presidents can abuse the pardon power. It doesn't take away from the fact that they have the power. If you want to address that, let's put an intermediary structure in place, a pardon committee made up of notable people who take applications from whoever is in prison, they evaluate it, and they make recommendations to the president. But even if they make recommendations to the president, notice that the president can overrule, can add, and so on and so forth. Abuchi indicated the problems with pardons, and I have no problems with this articulation, but it is a power that is needed, and it's a power that can be abused. It's been debated for 1,000 years, and the debate won't end. Here, the problem we are having is what I described, that the president or the presidency was not telling us the truth, because if there's consultation going on, well, just tell us there's consultation going on, and maybe the Council of State decided, well, look, we don't agree to what you are trying to do, or maybe they ran out of time. Nobody knows, except that somebody leaked a letter from the presidency, and we don't know who did the leakage. The president comes to deny something that is not important, because what is important is the leaked letter. He doesn't address it, and then he goes off, and he's now an ex-president, so we never know the truth, and then that just increases the trust deficit. People then don't trust their government, because when the government is doing something, well, we never know. And Oliver mentioned, look, tell me the truth. Even if it is unpalatable, we are old enough, we are big enough, we can deal with it.
All right.
Here we are treated like children, we are given half-truths, and then, we try to make sense out of it. We never make sense out of it. And then trust in government just continues to decline.
Oliver, what do you make of the development? And some say this gives you an idea that the presidency really didn't mean well, because some of the releases, the intended releases, are so questionable.
Something I agree. I do not think that ordinary Ghanaians are concerned that a 62-year-old man who is almost an invalid was being considered for pardon. I'm aware also of several people who are in dire humanitarian conditions in the prisons who are deserving of attention. And these are people who were deprived of systematically of a fair shot at the president's mercy. That's the crisis at the heart of this. But on the other hand, the exercise of the power of prerogative, or the prerogative of mercy, particularly for politicians and persons accused of financial crimes against the Republic, has not been without controversy under the Fourth Republic, particularly with regard to the perceived fairness, the irregular use of, or the political justifications of some of them. So the questions really go into the assessment that go into it and the information that that accompany them. You have talked, for instance, about the letter that was sent to the Council of State. It is without an accompanying dossier, from what I understand. And without that, on what basis are they given, are they being consulted on? What is the processes that has led the president to confirm an illness, for instance, even if it's a humanitarian condition? So that we know that it's a view which is a condition which is expressed in earnest. So you can't just give people a list and say, convicted of this, sick, so release, and say, I'm consulting some of the highest, senior-most officials this country has put together in the Council of State, and we think that is proper. But one of the things I have said on this question is that, particularly on the question of Atuisian, for instance, it goes to question the president's commitment around holding people accountable for something that we spent so much of our money on. So many, he's in fact the only individual, unless I'm corrected on this, who has seen jail on the issue. I remember that even the question of his refunding the money and escaping jail was a huge issue that divided Ghanaians.
That's right.
Has to be able to pay your way out of jail. So to see that a year, less than a year or a year on, he's been released on pardon, it showed that people did not believe there was in fact a commitment to hold anybody accountable for the incident. But one of the things I want to draw attention to in thinking about how we reform it going forward. One, let's think under the Fourth Republic generally. If you take President Kufuor and the Chatuchikata pardon, for instance, that was not without its own controversies, right? You remember Chatuchikata famously rejecting the pardon and then had to be forcibly thrown out of jail. But then the court held that even he didn't compromise his right to appeal and he was able to clear his name.
Yeah.
It was the incident of Dana Budakpi. I think a lot of people have forgotten that the sitting MP was jailed for 10 years. And that Dana Budakpi, after a year in jail, was then pardoned by Kufuor and came back into parliament to resume his seat. Right? That was a hugely divisive issue again in our republic as to persons feeling that he was one unnecessarily victimized to send a message and then given a pardon. If we continue to exercise the power in so much controversy, it will create distrust. We have President Mahama with the Montier 3 incident, for instance, which is also a big issue as to whether or not the president should have pardoned the Montier 3. Just like Abu Dhabi's case, which was challenging.
Well, as we understand, that kind of pardon was part of why Ghanaians punished the NDC.
Yeah, that's...
You know, I've heard that said so many times. Our friend Mami Mensah has published an article on this, where she actually questions this, that in the commentary relating to the elections, it didn't come up towards the election as to people's top reasons why the NDC lost. But some people continue to hold their view. But I think that in written into the exercise of the presidential pardon is the idea that the voters must have a chance to also have their say on it. And if that's why they punish the presidency, I think for fair reason. But one of the things that case does damage to, when it was challenged, there were 3 petitions, and I'm happy Alfred Tuyayeboa is here. He, Elikuri Magbanvan, and Bediu Asante, challenged this in the Supreme Court that the cases were consolidated. One, the Supreme Court said that the presidency was not required to publish any regulations under Article 296 as to how it is governed. And so it could just be done anyhow. And that the consultation with the Council of State was sufficient. Well, we've seen what that consultation is. It's a piece of letter which says nothing. But also importantly, the case reduces the effect of what advice again is, which is part of the consistent way in which we obstruct or undermine ways in which we can check the presidency, and we give the presidency consistent passes. That even when you are said to act in accordance with, we said the operative word is advice, and advance means you can do whatever you like. And we forget act in accordance with something. So those are some of the instances in our democracy where when the opportunity has arisen to put in more a formalized control process or to put structures on power, we have failed to do so.
Okay.
I'm hoping for 2 things. One, that there's a proper parole system that exists in place. So under the Prison Service Act, there's an automatic remission of sentences, which I think is 1/3, that it applies to everybody generally. But there's no process for when, persons under long sentences, offenders under long sentences or humanitarian reasons can be considered by a parole board and released, on good behavior that is mainstreamed into the process that enhances the fairness of our prisons. Almost everybody is sick in our prisons because the conditions are unsanitary.
That's right.
And so that's something that we need that's the part of equity and justice that we need to mainstream. I still believe that there's some sort of regulations, whether it's a constitutional instrument or legislation, must put in place a formalized process. And I like the idea that Professor Sari was suggesting, that people appear before some pardon committee or board, and that people have a chance to be able to plead their case to show that they have reformed or they have genuine humanitarian conditions. That the president does not need this kind of controversy. And it doesn't help us in the long run, I think.
Right. Interesting there. I'm coming to Joyce Bauer. But before I do that, Prof, the appointment of Dominic Ayine, you have already started a crusade. And you are saying that one of his first brief will be to go to the court and file a nolli prosequi for Jachi Kwesi. Correct?
Is that to me?
Yes.
Well, I say that in a light-hearted way because I think Jachi Kwesi's prosecution, Oliver Bakavamawo, I think he's on trial for treason felony, and maybe some other ones that I can't even recall.
Coup on Facebook.
Case is on appeal. Jakpe's case also is on appeal. Opuni's case, Agongo's case. To me, all of these are going to end, whether or not there is a nolli prosequi, because obviously it will be no attorney general under this regime will continue that prosecution. So yes, right. I say that in a light-hearted way, just to make fun of the system.
Okay, you say it on a light-hearted manner. Some of us don't take it on a light-hearted with a light-hearted approach. Dominic Ayine, once it's approved,
because my point is the prosecutions.
Yeah, I get it.
Discontinued. Yes,
I get it. My hope was that the Attorney General, the President, would have instructed him, seeing what was going on, to file nolli prosequi for these cases, which are clearly in a certain manner, but didn't do it. That opportunity would have been nice on him, but he didn't do it. So Dominic Ayine, once he's done and sworn in, the first day he begins his work is go to Jachi Kwesi's court and put in the nolli prosequi, get him out, Oliver Bakavamawo off, because these were really, well. So what do you say about this botched prosecution, pardons?
I believe that I would like to, on this one, take a cue from Professor Abuchi. He's an expert in constitutional matters. I believe he's expressed his very personal views on the matter. But, be that as it may, and to agree also with the fact, and I think that you have put it very succinctly yourself, that, in that matter of the contemnos, the Munchie 3 in particular,
right.
Maybe I'm one of those very few people, after reading Mami's, piece on that, and reading the judgment all over again yesterday, I am inclined to believe that for many, many, many reasons, that was actually one of the reasons why we lost, and lost in the manner in which we did. I genuinely believe it. I know that a lot of people probably stopped thinking about it and not much was said about it, and maybe because it was also such a sensitive matter, most people really didn't want to talk about it. And if you recall, at the time of the nomination of Professor Nana Jane, if you remember, it came up again. And I am convinced that, look, it was politically expeditious for us to do so under the circumstances. There may even have been schools of thought that actually approved of the fact that President Mahama really had no options. And now that the late Vice President is not with us, maybe I'm no longer bound by the conversations that actually took place. Know that he was actually strongly opposed to the grant of pardon to the contemnors in that matter. And the Supreme Court spoke at length about it, expressed their angst, and on this one it was very personal in many ways in that particular ruling. And I know that there are still many people who are out there and still thinking the same. Deep down, beyond the legalities and the constitutional aspects of it, I ask a question sometimes. They were young men, okay? First-time offenders. This was a politically very charged atmosphere. I look back on it now. What did they do and say that Wontumi TV and all these other very, very vociferous individuals have not done? So yes, I mean, look, be that as it may, I'm delighted that in the final analysis, President Akufo-Addo probably even disowned his own attempt. But this is something that is granted and steeped in the Constitution. And the president has the discretion and the latitude so to do. But you know, something, prison reforms are very close to my chest, because there's a young man that I've actually been mentoring over the years, languishing in jail for a crime that was just to put food on his table. And I believe that all of us as lawyers must, now that we have a new government in place, work very hard to review our prisons for that matter. The sentences, the sentencing, the lack of representation in some cases, even the fact that sometimes they're even forgotten over a very long period
on remand, not that they have been convicted.
No, there is no conviction, there's nothing. You know, they keep remanding them and suddenly it becomes lost in the system. The biggest part is prison infrastructure. Just look at what we have. This is even a good one. Go into the prisons and look at the diseases.
And remember, they are fed on less than 2 cedis a day.
Please, even that one doesn't go.
1 cedi, 80 pesos.
Yes, absolutely. Look,
that's for the whole day. Three meals.
Appalling conditions in our prisons in the entire country. You know, we want people to go through a reformative process, okay? We want people to be, you know, retrained and reintegrated into society. But to be honest, when people leave our prisons, they become even more hardened in the crimes or whatever it is that took them there. I think that this is another thing that we want to put at the doorstep of the new administration. And I am delighted that at this time, a very progressive lawyer is coming into the space as a substantive Attorney General. And I know that these are matters that we will continue to discuss as we go along. You know, as President Akufo-Addo and his botched attempt and all of that, you know, this matter of these banks, speaking about the Mr. Ato Essien in particular, we all know that there were many other people. It is a matter that, you know, there's so many other facets to this issue. And, you know, these are things that, to be honest, they break my heart, and I don't want to put too much premium on it. Whether he has withdrawn it, whether he has not, and all of these things are matters of public record.
The view is that the Essien took the fall for others?
Oh, I believe that too. I believe that too. I believe that too. He may not have been necessarily, we can't absolve him of all, you know, of all crimes or inactions or whatever. But there were many other people, many other fishes in the same pond. And it's unfortunate that he alone would take the fall for all of them. But yes, we don't want also to speak into the remit of matters that should actually be within the remit of the courts or the judicial system. But I am hopeful that the Attorney General will be very busy over the next few months, over the next few weeks. There are many of these matters that need to be looked at again. The issues of nolle prosequi and some of these matters, for example, you've spoken about the matter to do with Asset North. I mean, have you not watched, even with the challenges to do with the Electoral Commission, with some of the results and the collation, look at how the NDC has handled these matters. Beyond the other issues that have come up in terms of some fallouts and some acts of duress, etc., that people have complained about, we have actually submitted to the processes of court in these matters. We've actually gone to court even on many occasions to try and even get some of these members of parliament that we believe won the seats as we expected. But we are actually going through the process. And so I think that in a democracy also, we must also always remember that even though the wheels of justice may always grind sometimes very slowly, it is still the best that we have. And so whatever it is that we do within what it is we expect, let's remember that the rights even of all these people who are incarcerated, some against their will, are also human rights that also ought to be protected.
All right.
And let's hope that as we go along, we will see such progressive things come up. But you know, please, Prof, as for the need for presidents to have a certain latitude, I believe that the framers and drafters of the Constitution had very good reasons. You know, these ones were pardons that were even expected to be applied to white-collar crimes, you know, certain type of political crimes, etc. As a daughter of somebody whose father served a year at Nsawam because of politics, I believe that many of those people at some point would have been expecting these pardons. So they were very good reasons why this was actually given as part of the discretions that the president is allowed. The question is that we have fortunately not even been abusing them. And whenever there's abuse also, they have recourse even to go back to the courts for interpretation.
All right.
So I think these are some things that...
Let me go to Alfred Choyebua.
Yes, I would actually want to hear his views on this matter.
Let me go to Alfred Choyebua.
Then also in pocket law.
Yes, Alfred, thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning, Thompson.
Great to have you. So we have been wondering what exactly has been going on. That the presidency issues this letter on the 31st. It is going to Council of State, and the list of people to be pardoned, including people who have just been put in only how many months ago, in April of 2024, narcotic offenses. People are not excited about SCN and so on and so forth. And then a letter comes in, and then what? That's it. End of the story. People are saying the president, it tells you the president's mind, that he didn't mean well if these are the classes of people that attract his attention for pardon.
Thank you very much. Now, Samson, if we take a look at Article 72 of our Constitution, it gives every president the power to pardon people who have been convicted.
Alfred, hold on briefly for me, because I was supposed to do this, that there's some development that we need to get national attention to, and for some action to go to Ejura, because there has been some youth who have not been happy with the youth, and they have gone on rampage. They have free suspects on remand, and they have set the police station on fire. They've set it alight, and that's what you are looking at right now. So I suppose that national security clearly will be aware of this going on right now. Maybe there's a need for escalating the intervention that is required. Where are these people now? They just did this. What is it exactly? So we are finding out, and we will update you on why some youth in Ejura reportedly are the ones behind this, that they went on a rampage, they free suspects on remand, and then decided to set the police station alight. Right. So we'll be following it and update you. Yes, Alfred, let's hear you.
All right. Yes, so I was talking about Article 72 that gives the president the right to pardon people who have been convicted and sentenced to prison term. Former President Akufo-Addo was the president of Ghana from January 7, 2017 until 7 January 2025. And so it is true that on 31st of December, a letter was written to the Council of State, pursuant to the provisions in Article 72(1) of the Constitution, to consult them on various petitions that the President had received from some convicts. Now, if you look at the list, as I was monitoring the discussion this morning, it appears 2 individuals whose name appeared in the list actually ignited this kind of public interest in the whole process. Otherwise, since 1993, all presidents have exercised this power under the Constitution. And listeners and viewers will recall that acting as a citizen in 2016, I sued the Attorney General in respect of the monetary pardon. And the argument was not that the president didn't have the power to pardon for all offenses, but I limited my argument to contempt when people are convicted for contempt. Now back to the issue under consideration. These individuals submitted petitions. Those petitions were vetted. And then, because the president couldn't sit at the Jubilee House on his own to pardon people, submitted a letter to the Council of State the Council of State on the 2nd of January actually did meet the president as part of the consultation process. And at the end of the consultation, it was decided that these people should not be pardoned. So that's how come when news started coming around that the president had pardoned these individuals, the president had issued a statement to indicate to the public that no such a decision had been taken by the president.
So the Council of State had advised, you are saying that the Council of State had advised that none of the individuals on the list should enjoy a pardon?
Not advised, but the Council of State consulted with the president. And this one is not about in consultation with.
Mm-hmm.
So the president consulted the Council of State, and at the end of the day, the decision was taken that these people should not be pardoned. That's what I can say for now.
And this was on the 2nd of January?
On the 2nd, yes. But unfortunately, on the state, the letter that was forwarded to the Council of State was leaked. And instead of most people, including, some media personnel, taking time to look at that letter, decided to come to a conclusion that the president had pardoned some people, because that letter was clearly a letter that the president had sent to the Council of State as part of the consultation process. And so for now, those individuals are still in prison custody.
Isn't it strange that there was a blanket rejection of the entire list? Isn't it strange? And this happened, on the 2nd? Yes,
that's a consultation process, because the president will have to consult the Council of State. And in that consultation process, the decision was reached that the pardon that they were requesting for should not be granted, and same was denied. But something, when it comes to consultation and advice, we've been told by the Supreme Court that the president is not bound by advice or the consultation, the advice that the people that he's supposed to consult may give him. So the president could have just gone his way to say, despite the consultation I've had, I may want to, on my own, exert my power to grant. But the president says no. So far as consultation has gone on, and there is a decision not to pardon, he was not going to pardon them, and he didn't do so. So currently, that's the state of this letter that has been circulated.
Were you surprised? Were you surprised when you heard many people ask, why is Gregory Afoko not on that list? Why was he not in consideration at all? He had done a trial, he was over, then he gets back in a bizarre manner, he's back on trial again, and people have been expecting that he could enjoy the pardon as well.
He is not a convict. He is still an accused person on remand.
That's right.
So he could have taken advantage of the powers of the president and Article 72 of the Constitution. So that's the reason why his name couldn't be featured in the list.
That's a good one for him. What do you say to others who suggest that, this very old woman, 64 years, and who is seriously hypertensive and has been spending her time only at the prison infirmary, has done 8 years, of prison in hard labor. She was convicted for human trafficking on the 6th of June 2020. She's not done 8 years. She was convicted on the 6th of June 2023 to be in prison for 8 years. The Council of State did not consider her to. Hello, Mr. Chuaibwa.
Hello, yes, Samson.
Yes, the 64-year-old woman, she was found not to be deserving by the Council of State?
Not that she was not found to be deserving. The Council of State had this kind of consultation process with the president, and the decision was taken not to pardon. I don't want to isolate individuals on the list, because the fact that President Akufo-Addo did not pardon all of them, that's something that the sitting president can also not go ahead to do. So that's why I don't want us to come to that conclusion that he is deserving or he is not deserving. The decision was taken that they should not be pardoned. But if the sitting president also receives petition from them again and examines and consults the Council of Trent, they come to a conclusion that they deserve to be pardoned. I think that can be done.
Okay. Let me check if any of my guests want to ask you a question or want to say a quick thing, having listened to you. Anyone? Having listened to Ejura? You want to ask anything or you want to say something?
Well, not to ask, but I mentioned something about those on remand.
On remand, yeah.
Now, it's imperative that for those on remand, as he rightly said, those are not convicts, so they can't be pardoned because pardon is reserved for convicts. However, those on remand, the executive reserves prosecutorial discretion, which has to do with nolle prosequia. It's also as simple. And so we can simply just enter a nolle prosequia for persons who have been on remand for more than 5 years. I mean, for goodness sake, nobody should be on remand for that long. And indeed, the Constitution itself says that when a person has been on remand for so long and the trial is not ending early, the person should be considered the option of being granted bail. But often we don't exercise that. So I think prosecutorial discretion should be exercised here and those persons released by way of a nolle prosequia being entered if the prosecution simply cannot conclude.
Okay.
And that could be equivalent to pardon in this case.
Right, Rabbi.
Yes, Samson, I'm too happy.
Yeah, and very brief, so we go to the next subject. Yeah.
Not technical, of course. I'm not expected to
That's
talk
all right.
legally. But the social aspect of it is what got me, especially the issue of constituting a committee. Learning from the point of the Muntie theory, if consultation was done broadly, like my sister admitted, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have lost some votes that is being perceived to have been lost through that or the limited consultation. Also on Prof's position of checking through or maybe even vetting to know who is really qualified to be granted this kind of pardon is also a very good thing to consider, considering health, considering age, especially that of the woman we are
There's a prison council. I think normally it comes from all of that. The petitions go to...
Yeah.
So though I'm a politician, I would also want to say, moving forward, that should be taken critically without party colors or political consideration. The social aspect is really dear to me. And then also finally, what my sister said about rehabilitation, ex-convict. Are you coming back to be a better person to the society, or you are coming to be a more hardened?
Right, we have to move on now. Thank you very much. If you're still here with us, and I believe you are, as it happens always, every Saturday, Newsfile, top in the trends, and we are receiving all the tons of messages you are sharing, but forgive us that we can't share all of them. And we want to say good morning to all of you listening on KTU Radio. KTU Radio, that should be in Koforidua, right? Thanks for listening this morning. You joined us as early as 8 a.m. when we start the show. KTU Radio in Koforidua. Thank you very much. Now, let's go to the next matter of the petition. But before we do that, let me bring in Professor Kwaku Asare for if he has any final comments to make before he goes. Professor Kwaku Asare, on a principled stance, is not going to make any comments on the petition. Yes, Prof, if you have any final comments to make, so you can take leave of us.
Yeah, my final comment is thanks for having me, and I hope you guys have a fruitful conversation on the next topic. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So he is the one who says that he doesn't want to comment on this matter for some very good reasons, because I'll end it there. Let me not say more. Right, thanks very much. And as I understand it, the presidential power of pardon is not reserved for only convicted persons. President Ford pardoned President Nixon even before he was charged with impeachment. Prof, yeah.
Well, our Constitution is...
And this coming from somebody who had something to do with this list.
Oh, okay.
Right, but I'm saying our Constitution is not the American Constitution. Both by practice and by the wording of the Constitution as I understand it, the expectation is that you should have gone through the process. You should have been convicted. I can't remember if anybody was convicted who was still who was still going through the process. You see, our system may defeat that perception because, like I said, pre-conviction is executive, and then conviction is judicial. So before you're convicted, you are in the hands not of the court, unless you're on remand. Until you're convicted, you are in the hands of the executive by way of the Justice Ministry and the police, for example.
Right. You are not in the hands of the.
You're not in the hands of the courts.
Courts, right.
You are not owned by the courts. When you are convicted, you are owned by the court per the conviction, but you quickly transition into the
back into the executive.
No. Well, back into the executive. You're right. Back into the executive.
Right.
And once you transition to the executive, well, maybe this justifies the argument Professor Tunkwasara was making, that in that context you have the executive's participation.
Right.
My only reason, and I'm not persuaded with all respect, but my only reason for being against pardons is because I still think that we should rather fix the judicial system. For when people are justly convicted, there will be no need for pardons.
Okay. In the UK, the process is so stringent, and they don't do it. They hardly do it. They rarely do it. And it goes through a certain stringent process. I hope that we're able to get there. So what about this petition from Prosecutorial?